All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. It is Wednesday, September 18th, 2019, and we are live. So I hope everybody's doing well. Everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. All right. Okay, so look, we have a lot to talk about. I wanted to do this broadcast. I actually prepared these notes a few days ago, actually on the 15th, but had some other broadcasts to do and wasn't able to get to this topic here. But I've talked about some of this in some of my previous broadcasts where we deal with the transatlantic slave trade, and we talk some about the 1619 project, right? So you've heard me talk about the year 1526. And with all the talk about the 1619 project with the New York Times, and we just commemorated August 20th, 1619, and that commemorates 400 years of those 20 and odd Africans coming into Virginia, okay, coming into Point Comfort in Virginia, which is in Hampton, Virginia, all right? So a lot of talk is not about 1526, all right? So contrary to popular belief, 1619 is not when Africans first came to this land that we call the United States of America, for a number of reasons, okay? So we're going to get into this conversation tonight, all right? How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page, okay, everybody? And then African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Our current promotion is get 3 months for the price of one, okay? And that's going on for a couple more days. All right, so let's look at this information. So the 1619 project is from the New York Times. So a lot of you all have seen the articles from the New York Times, NewYorkTimes.com. Some of you all got the insert that was in the actual physical New York Times paper, all right? And this insert has all the articles from the 1619 project, which deal with different aspects of the history of the transatlantic slave trade. And right on the front, it has a quote from historian John Hope Franklin that says, "We've got to tell the unvarnished truth." We've got to tell the unvarnished truth, okay? So we see that here. And then below that, it says 400 years after enslaved Africans were first brought to Virginia, most Americans still don't know the full story of slavery, okay? And that's true. Most Americans, white Americans, African Americans, most of us don't understand the history of slavery in this country because we don't understand the history of this country, all right? So if we're ever going to get reparations, you've heard me say this before, and on the Black Agenda tour that I'm on with Michi X and Jice Johnson, I talk about this as well in my lectures, etc. If we're ever going to get reparations, America needs a massive history lesson, all right? So let's look at this information. How you doing, Kim? Let's see, we have Rod, Sherwin, just a few of the people watching. And then also, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show, or at our website, africanhistorynetwork.com. It helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, etc. It helps when I have to travel also. And be sure to register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they didn't teach you in school. So that class meets live Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time online, and all the sessions are recorded, and so you can go back and watch it over and over again, all right? So I've seen a number of articles dealing with 1619, Jamestown, Virginia, dealing with the transatlantic slave trade. There's been maybe 3 or 4 that I've seen that talk about 1526. One really good one was from the Washington Post, September 7th, 2019, entitled "Before 1619, There Was 1526, The Mystery of the First Enslaved Africans in What Became the United States." Okay. Then also there was one from 2018 from Smithsonian Institute, smithsonianmag.com, the official website of the Smithsonian Institute, smithsonianmag.com. The misguided focus on 1619 as the beginning of slavery in the U.S. damages our understanding of American history. The misguided focus on 1619 as the beginning of slavery in the U.S. damages our understanding of American history. The year the first enslaved Africans were brought to Jamestown is drilled into students' memories, but overemphasizing this date distorts history. And it wasn't even Jamestown, it was actually Hampton, okay? It's Point Comfort in Hampton, all right? So I'm gonna refer to my notes here because I have a lot of notes dealing with this information. So you all just bear with me here, all right? So, I talk about how the country is marking the 400th year anniversary of the arrival of the first enslaved Africans to the English colony of Virginia, okay? The significance of their arrival cannot be overstated. From that moment onward, slavery existed in the colonies that became the United States of America in an unending chain until the passage of the 13th Amendment, which is going to be basically, so after 246 years, you had a 13th Amendment after the Civil War, all right? So the Civil War is 1861 to 1865, and the 13th Amendment is going to be ratified December 6th of 1865, adopted December 18th, 1865. All right. Now, for those 20 and odd Africans, these were not the first enslaved Africans to set foot on what we call the contiguous United States. Okay, some people say the continent of North America, but I specifically talk about the contiguous United States, which means contiguous means connected. That does not include Alaska and Hawaii, because Alaska and Hawaii geographically are not connected to the U.S. Okay, I'm not talking about the Caribbean, even though technically the Caribbean is classified as North America. When you look up the Caribbean, Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba, the Caribbean technically is classified as North America, but those are islands. They're not connected to the United States. Okay, so I'm speaking specifically of the land that we call the United States of America. So when the enslaved Africans first come to this land, based upon what we know, based upon history, what we know, that happens 93 years earlier, okay, in 1526, when Spanish explorers brought 100 Africans as slaves with them to a doomed settlement in what is now South Carolina. Some people look at it as possibly Georgia. Most of the sources I see say South Carolina, okay? Now, within weeks of their arrival, those enslaved Africans revolted, then they vanished. Within weeks of their arrival, those enslaved Africans revolted, then they vanished, okay? So when we look at Juan Garrido, all right, Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. talks about Juan Garrido. And Juan Garrido is probably the first African person we know of by name coming to this land. Now, if you read The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, okay? Not this book. That's Dr. Gates' book. This right here, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. And I just interviewed him August 21st, 2019, the day after the 400th year commemoration. And if you go and look, follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. I did 3 interviews on August 20th, the 400th year anniversary. I interviewed Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, and Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene. They're all in the Hidden Colors documentaries. They're in other documentaries also. And those were 3 of my teachers. And I was supposed to interview Dr. David Imhotep that same day. I was going to do 4 interviews, but he was out of town, so we had to do it the next day. But his book, it has 713 footnotes. It thoroughly documents an African presence in this country going back tens of thousands of years ago, specifically 51,700 years ago, in the area we today call South Carolina. And these were the Khoisan. These were the Khoisan who have the oldest DNA on the planet. Okay, the Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. They come from Southern Africa. They are the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world, and they were here in this land. They built pyramid mounds up and down the Mississippi River. You had about 1 million mounds in total in this land. Today, there are only about 100,000. And so you're going to have an African presence here. All right. In 2004, Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina, made a discovery in South Carolina in Allendale County, and they found 13 different types of evidence that thoroughly documents an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. Okay, they found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics. They found paintings, linguistics, skulls, skeletons, tools, structures. They found 13 different types of disciplines, 13 different types of evidence documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. Okay, so if you ScienceDaily.com has an article dealing with this also that you can read as well, and it deals with it came out in 2004, and it deals with Dr. Albert Goodyear's discovery. All right, so usually when, and the name of that article is "New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago." It came, so this article is from November 18th, 2004. It's about Dr. Albert Goodyear's discovery. Okay. This article is 15 years old, and it's still up. ScienceDaily.com is a scientific website. It's still up because I'm looking at the article right now. I'm going to post a link here. All right. So when this conversation comes up about the history of the transatlantic slave trade in this country and African people first coming to this land, 1526 is not talked about in general. 1513 with Juan Garrido is not talked about, which I'm going to come to in a minute. But we got to deal with the ancient African presence that was here. And this is before Native Americans come into existence. All right. Now, this is no disrespect to our Native American brothers and sisters. I'm dealing with history. Okay. I'm not dealing with opinions. I'm dealing with history and archaeological evidence. So Asians come to this land around 3000 BC, about 5,000 years ago. And the Africans and the Asians intermix, and their offspring are who we have come to call the Native Americans. All right. So we have to understand this, and Dr. David Imhotep breaks this down in his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. But also, I've interviewed him 12 times. All right. So if you go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com and on the homepage, click on Listen to Podcasts, you can listen to the podcast of the interviews I've done with them. And we have a few of those interviews on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. Okay. So all this information is thoroughly documented. The problem is that we don't know it, and it's not taught in our schools. Okay, so that's the real problem with it. It's thoroughly documented, but we don't know it, and it's not taught in our schools. All right. So very quickly here, I pulled up the PowerPoint presentation. Let me flip over to this screen so you can see this, and you can see this, and you can go research this yourself. Okay. Proper documentation ends all conversation. You don't have to believe a word that I say. Go do your own research. All right. So his new book, Dr. David Imhotep's new book, comes out either December of 2019 or January 2020. When I interviewed him, he talked about that because this book is out of print. So when you go on Amazon, people have told me it's like $500 to $800. Maybe you can find an African-American bookstore, African-American owned bookstore that has the book. Okay. And they're not charging an arm and a leg for it. So just so you see, and he has to get his website back up also. Okay. His background is research. It ain't building websites and marketing. Okay. All right. So page 14 of his book, he lays out some of the information that I just told you, and I have it memorized because I cite some of this information in my presentations. But page 14 of his book, it deals with evidence of an African presence 51,700 years ago in a campsite in Allendale County, South Carolina, discovered by Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. This is what they found: artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeleton structures, and tools. All right. And then on the cover of his book, so on the inside flap of his book, it has a description of the cover, and it talks about Tierra del Fuego. Tierra del Fuego is the southern tip of South America, And it says the picture on the cover was taken during the voyage of the HMS Challenger on the 1872 to 1876 voyage funded by the British government for scientific purposes. This indigenous man's picture was taken at the most southern tip of South America, Tierra del Fuego, which basically means the land of fire. The expedition is believed to have been the first to have an official photographer. This picture can be found in London's Natural History Museum today. All right. Now, this is a picture of Dr. Albert Goodyear. I'm just giving you some background historical information that most people don't know. This is easily researchable and verifiable. So this is a summary of the article at ScienceDaily.com's website entitled New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago. Okay. Once again, an article from November 18th, 2004. Every city I lecture in, when I ask them about this article, nobody's ever read it or heard of it. Okay. So, and one of the things that we have to understand is like a lot of what our people know about slavery comes from the TV show Roots. I mean, not TV show, the miniseries Roots that was on TV. Roots was based upon a novel. Okay. The book that Alex Haley wrote, and this is not a slight or an attack on Alex Haley. The book Alex Haley wrote, Roots, was a novel. It was not a history book. Okay. And it's loosely based on his research on his family tree. All right. However, if you saw the interview that I did, let me take the screen share off for a minute. If you saw the interview that I did with Dr. Leonard Jeffries on August 20th, 1619, go back and watch that interview. Dr. Jeffries was friends with Alex Haley. He worked with Alex Haley for 7 years. Dr. Jeffries was brought on to be a technical advisor and a historian working on the production of the miniseries Roots. He was brought on by Alex Haley. Okay, Alex Haley sold the rights to Roots to Europeans to actually make the movie, to make the miniseries that aired on ABC in 1977, I think it was. Okay, so Alex Haley didn't do the Roots miniseries; he wrote the book. Go watch the interview I did with Dr. Jeffries. Dr. Jeffries talked about how he was on the set of the miniseries Roots and they're filming scenes. Okay. And he's on there as a technical advisor to make sure what is being depicted is historically accurate. And he's telling them that certain things that they're doing is not historically accurate. And he's telling them what to fix. And he said, they told him, we understand that, Dr. Jeffries, and we respect you, but we don't want to do that. We're going to do it this way. So you have to understand what you are seeing in the miniseries Roots, even though it was powerful, even though you can learn a lot from it, there's some historical inaccuracies there as well. So we have to really understand the real history. We have to understand what it is that we're really watching. Okay. And this is not an attack on Alex Haley at all, but we got to understand the difference. Okay. So let's go to this quickly here. Okay. So here is a summary of the article from ScienceDaily.com. This is their summary of the article. It says radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Okay. Now, who are these humans? Native Americans don't exist at this period of time. Who are these humans? These were the Khoisan. Okay. So this is what we have to understand. And even the Genome Project documented when they took DNA samples of 100,000 people around the world, the Genome Project documented that the Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet as well. All right. So let's continue here. So if we look at information dealing with Juan Garrido, right? This goes back to 1513, all right? So Africans arrived in North America more than a century before both the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock and before the, so that's 1620, 1621, all right, dealing with the Mayflower, 1620. And before these Angolans arrived in Virginia. What's more, we even know the identity of the first documented African to arrive based upon what we know, the first by name. His name was Juan Garrido, okay? And he was not a slave. Now, Dr. Gates has an article, Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., who I disagree with on some aspects of what he talks about dealing with the transatlantic slave trade, but he does write good articles because I've read dozens of his articles. When he wrote articles for theroot.com, I've read dozens of his articles, okay? And he talks about how, so Juan Garrido came into Florida with the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon, all right? And he gives some background information on Juan Garrido. And he says, and like the other conquistadors, Juan Garrido soon succumbed to the lure of wealth and fame in the New World. He joined Diego Velázquez and the legendary Juan Ponce de Leon in the colonizations of Cuba and Puerto Rico, respectively. Then in 1513, he joined Juan Ponce de Leon's well-known expedition to Florida in search of the Fountain of Youth, when he became the first known African to arrive in the country, what would become the United States of America. They come into Florida. So he gives some background information on De Leon, Juan Garrido. Okay. There's an article from theroot.com that you can read. I'm going to give you the name of that article here. And I think it's Who Was the First African American is the name of that article. Yeah, from theroot.com. And he talks about Juan Garrido, who was the first African American. Then also in his book, The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. Okay, so many people saw this book here. All right, so many people saw the 6-part series on PBS back in 2012 that aired, called The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. Some of you may have it on DVD. All right, you may have ordered that from PBS. But he also has a book that is the companion to it. All right. Okay, so Rod Drake said Alex Haley did not write Roots and stole the story. He would later have to pay a settlement. Do some research on that. Dr. Jeffries talked about that because he knew Alex Haley. What happened was, and I've interviewed Dr. Jeffries about that. We'll put that on YouTube. That's not what happened. Okay. The reason why he paid the settlement wasn't because he stole information. He paid the settlement because he didn't want to distract from the movie Roots. Dr. Jeffries knew what happened. He talked about that as well. Okay, so you want to do some more research on that. What happens is Europeans go to Africa, hear stories, they write them down and copyright the stories. Okay, so if you had family members that came from Mississippi 2 or 3 generations ago, and they were sharecroppers, and then they come up here and go to work in the auto industry in General Motors, and then they put their children through college, their children go on and become successful, right? And then somebody else, their family comes from Alabama 2 or 3 generations ago, and they were sharecroppers, and they come up here and go to work in General Motors factory, okay? And they put their children through college and they become successful. Did you steal that story from them? Did they steal that story from you? No. That's your experience because you got similar circumstances. You have similar conditions that you're coming from. So you got similar stories. All right. So what we don't understand is how Europeans go to Africa, hear stories, write them down, document them, and copyright them. And then anybody else that has a similar story, because they're coming from similar circumstances, then they will say, oh, you stole our story. No, that's not what happened. No, you went to Africa and you stole the story. All right. So we got to do more research on that. But Dr. Jeffries knows what happens because he worked with Alex Haley, and he's told me about that before. All right. And not only that, he talked about it. Also, he talked about it when he was here at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History as well, because I asked him about the question, because I already knew the answer. I've interviewed him about that before. We talked about that before. So when he was here at the museum, and I think I recorded that. I got to put that I got to put that up. Okay, I have to put that on YouTube as well, because a lot of people don't know the actual history behind that. Okay, they just go by what they read on Wikipedia or something. Okay, let's continue here. And if anybody knows Dr. Jeffries, you can ask him about this himself, yourself. He'll tell you. All right, let's continue. Okay, so in his book, on page 3 and 4, he talks about Juan Garrido, right? And he says, perhaps one of the best known and most colorful of the free Black conquistadors was Juan Garrido, Garrido, born about 1480 in West Africa. Juan Garrido either was sold to Portuguese slave traders or somehow traded on his own to Lisbon, Portugal, where about 10% of the city was of African descent. In about 1495, he moved to Seville, Spain. There, as a free man, perhaps in the employ of a Spaniard named Pedro Garrido, Garrido, he joined the 1503 AD expedition, the year 1503, expedition of Governor Nicolas de Ovando to Hispaniola. Okay, the first of many adventures. Okay, so Hispaniola is going to be later called Haiti. In 1538, in a 1538 petition to the Spanish crown asking for financial support for his services and loyalty, Juan Garrido described himself as a free Black resident of Mexico City, who for the last 30 years or more had volunteered his services to Spain. Quote, I was present at all the invasions and conquests and pacifications which were carried out, all of which I did at my own expense, end quote. Now, Juan Garrido, along with many other free and enslaved Africans or Blacks, had in fact participated in some of the famed expeditions by Spain against Native American populations. For example, in 1508, he and another free Black man, Juan Gonzalez, joined Juan Ponce de Leon's expedition against Puerto Rico. All right. Now, Juan Ponce de Leon is one of the Spanish conquistadors. These are the people coming in, conquering the Caribbean, conquering the islands in the name of Spain. A third Black man, a mixed race conquistador named Francisco Mejias, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Mejias, played a key role in establishing the island's first ranches. At his untimely death at the hands of Carib Indians, Mejias possessed more than 200 pesos in gold. Immediately after his Puerto Rican adventure, Juan Garrido engaged in gold mining and secured several Black slaves to assist him. With native populations decimated by European-induced diseases, labor shortages plagued Spanish efforts to mine, farm, and establish sugar plantations. Okay, because see, one of the things Columbus is setting up, so this is after Columbus set sails on his 4 voyages, starting August 3rd, 1492, when he set sail on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. This ties into the history of the Moors in Europe. To understand the transatlantic slave trade, you got to deal with the 800-year occupation of the Africans known as the Moors in Europe. They go all throughout Europe. They go in 711 AD from Morocco. They go into Spain, they go into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal. And they're taking the teachings from ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, into Europe. This is going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages, but they're introducing all types of food. They're going to introduce cotton into Europe. They introduce sugar. And a lot of Europeans are going to get hooked on sugar. One of the things Columbus was looking for, okay, in his voyages was also another source of sugar, all right? So they weren't just looking for spices, gold, and silver. They're also looking for another source of sugar. So when they conquer the Puerto Rico and Bahamas, Jamaica, what's going to be called Haiti or Hispaniola, things like this, St. Dominique, they're setting up these large sugarcane plantations, all right, to feed their need and desire for sugar also. This also becomes a commodity as well to trade, market, what have you, all right? Okay, so we have that. So that all ties into this history. All right. So when we have, okay, so it says, with native populations decimated by European-induced diseases, labor shortages plagued Spanish efforts to mine, farm, and establish sugar plantations. With a keen eye to the main chance, Juan Garrido joined Spaniards who raided the Caribbean islands of Guadalupe, Dominica, and Santa Cruz in search of Carib slaves. Native Americans with a reputation for fierceness and cannibalism. Dominica and Santa Cruz in search of Carib slaves. Native Americans with a reputation for fierceness and cannibalism. Now, in 1513 AD, and again in 1521, Juan Garrido rejoined Juan Ponce de Leon as he explored and claimed the island of Bimini and all of Florida for Spain, thereby becoming the first known African to set foot on what was to become the United States of America. Because we know his name and the date of his landing in Florida, in a sense, we can say that Juan Garrido was the first African American. And it is somehow fitting and a bit ironic that this book is being published in the 500th year anniversary of Juan Garrido's arrival in what is now the continental United States. Okay, so this book came out in 2013, 2012. Let me look at the copyright here. Yeah, 2013. All right. Okay, so that is pages 3 and 4 of the African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. Okay. So, and if you look at the article that Gates wrote for theroot.com, he has some of that information in the article as well. Who was the first African American? That's from October 12th, 2012. And October 12th, we know, is Columbus Day, right? All right, so let's continue. All right, so the story of those 29 Africans coming into Virginia has set the stage for countless scholars and teachers interested in telling the story of slavery in English North America. Unfortunately, 1619 is not the best place to begin a meaningful inquiry into the history of African peoples in America. All right. Certainly there is a story to be told that begins in 1619, of course. So I'm not saying that didn't happen. We need to study that, but we have to understand the chronology of history leading up to that. But it is neither well suited to help us understand slavery as an institution, nor to help us better grasp the complicated place of African peoples in the early modern Atlantic. All right. For too long, the focus on 1619 has led the general public and scholars alike to ignore more important issues, and worse, to silently accept unquestioned assumptions that continue to impact us in remarkably consequential ways. As a historical signifier, 1619 may be more insidious than instructive. All right, so now it's also important to understand that in 1619, codified slave laws don't exist in the 13 colonies. All right. So the first colony to have codified slave laws is going to be Massachusetts in 1641. All right. So and they come to the colonies at different times. If you read Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. in chapter 2, he breaks down this history. So in 1526, enslaved Africans were part of a Spanish expedition to establish an outpost on the North American coast in present-day South Carolina. Those Africans launched a rebellion in November of 1526 of that year and effectively destroyed the Spanish settlers' ability to sustain the settlement, which they abandoned a year later. Nearly 100 years before Jamestown, Virginia, before Jamestown or Hampton, African actors enabled American colonies to survive, and they were equally able to destroy European colonial ventures. So if we look at those 20 Africans coming into Virginia, right? They come in on the White Line slave ship in late August 1619. The White Lion, which was a pirate ship, which we refer to as a slave ship, but it was a pirate ship, commanded by, the captain's name was John Jope, Jope. It sailed into Point Comfort and dropped anchor in the James River. Virginia colonist John Rolfe, okay, John Rolfe was the widower of Pocahontas, okay. Virginia colonist John Rolfe documented the arrival of the ship and 20 and odd, what he called Negroes, but we call Africans, on board. His journal entry is immortalized in textbooks, with 1619 often used as a reference point for teaching the origins of slavery in America. All right. Now, it is believed that the first Africans brought to the colony of Virginia were Kumbundu speaking peoples from the kingdom of Ndongo, Ndongo, that is in present day Angola. Slave traders forced the captives to march several hundred miles to the coast to board this slave ship called the San Juan Batista, okay, one of at least 36 transatlantic Portuguese and Spanish slave ships. The ship embarked with about 350 Africans on board. The hunger and disease took a swift toll. En route, about 150 captives died. Then the San Juan Batista was approached, when it approached what is now Veracruz, Mexico, in the summer of 1619, it encountered two ships, the White Lion and the Treasurer. These were English pirate ships. These English pirate ships, they hijacked the San Juan Batista. Okay, the crews stormed the vulnerable slave ship and seized 50 to 60 of the remaining Africans. And then they're going to put them on these two pirate ships, the White Lion and the Treasurer. European trade of enslaved Africans began in the 1400s, right about 1441 with the Portuguese. The Portuguese were the first ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade. They're going to dominate for the first 200 years, okay? Spain is going to be right behind them because geographically, Spain and Portugal are right next to each other. So the first example that we see that we have of Africans being taken against their will and put on board European ships would take the story back to 1441, when the Portuguese captured 12 Africans in Cabo Branco, Branco, which is modern day Mauritania in North Africa, and brought them to Portugal as enslaved African people. Now, in the region that would become the United States, there were no enslaved Africans before the Spanish occupation of Florida in the early 16th century, early 1500s, according to Linda Haywood, Heywood, and John Thornton, who are professors at Boston University and co-authors of the book Central Africans, Atlantic Creoles, and the Foundation of the Americas, 1585 to 1660. Central Africans, Atlantic Creoles, and the Foundation of the Americas, 1585 to 1660. Linda Haywood said, quote, there were significant numbers who were brought in as early as 1526. All right. So that year, some of these enslaved Africans became part of a Spanish expedition to establish an outpost in what is now South Carolina. They rebelled, preventing the Spanish from founding the colony. They rebelled. All right. So the uprising did not stop the inflow of enslaved African people into Spanish Florida. Professor Linda Haywood said, quote, we don't know how many followed, but there was certainly a slave population around St. Augustine, Florida, end quote. Now, Africans also played a role in England's early colonization efforts. Enslaved Africans may have been on board Sir Francis Drake's fleet when he arrived at Roanoke Island in 1586 and failed to establish the first permanent English settlement in America. He and his cousin, Sir John Hawkins, made 3 voyages to Guinea and Sierra Leone and enslaved between 1,200 and 1,400 Africans. Although not part of present-day America, Africans from the West Indies were also present in the English colony of Bermuda in 1616, where they provided expert knowledge on tobacco cultivation to the Virginia Company. All right. Now, while Professors Linda Haywood and John Thornton acknowledge that 1616 remains a key date for slavery in America, they also argue that focusing too much on the first enslaved people at Jamestown, Virginia, or in Virginia, period, can distort our understanding of history. Quote, it does so by failing to understand that the development of slavery was a gradual process, and that laws other than English laws applied. Okay, laws other than English laws applied. Now, in 1619, slavery as codified by law did not yet exist in Virginia or elsewhere in places that would later become the United States. Okay, and this is true. But any question about the status of Black people or African people in the colonies, free, enslaved, or indentured servants, was made clear with the passage of the Virginia Slave Codes of 1705. The Virginia Slave Codes of 1705, which were a series of laws that stripped away legal rights and legalized the barbaric and dehumanizing nature of slavery. Okay, so for more information on this, you can check out the article, America's History of Slavery Began Long Before Jamestown. That's from history.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel, history.com. If we look at, and how's everybody doing? Okay. We've got Urkia, Edward, who else we have here? Let me look at some of your comments here. We're going to go to Before the Mayflower by Maroon Bennett Jr. in just a minute, where he really breaks a lot of this history down. Howard Harris, Sharifa, okay? So everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page and on YouTube. Invite your friends to tune in. It's a real history lesson. Also, if you like this type of information, be sure to register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they didn't teach you in school. We do this on Thursdays, usually 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do the classes live. We do them online. And all the sessions are recorded. If you miss anything, you can go back and watch it over and over again, okay? As soon as you register, you can watch classes 1 through 4, and there's about 36 hours of bonus content. The full course is regularly $130. It's on sale $80, okay? So as soon as you can watch from around the world. As soon as you register, you can, register, you can start watching. All right. So if we look at, let me see which page is this here. In Before the Mayflower, chapter 2 is crucial. All right. So we got Alton, Reese, just a few of the people watching. Okay. How's everybody doing? So what's going to happen is we're going to see that these laws evolve over time. And you're also going to have some Africans who could, so in 1619, you're going to have indentured servitude that exists. Codified slave laws don't exist at this period of time in the 13 colonies. All right. So on page 35, Maroon Bennett Jr. Says, in Virginia, then as in other colonies, the first Black settlers fell into a well-established socioeconomic groove, which carried with it no implications of racial inferiority. That came later. But in the interim, a period of 40 years or more, the first Black settlers accumulated land, voted, testified in court, and mingled with whites on a basis of equality. They owned other Black servants, and certain Blacks imported and paid for white servants whom they apparently held in servitude. So this is it's going to evolve leading up to 1641, because in 1641, you're going to have the first colony to have codified slave laws, which is Massachusetts. This is going to evolve over this period of time. The way that slavery evolved in this country, the way we think it evolved, is not actually the way it happened. All right. Let me go to another section here. In the back of the book, he talks about how the evolution of this. He gives a chronology of the evolution of the codified slave laws in the back of the book. Let me find what I'm looking for here. One of the things he talks about is Africans, Black people in the colonies voting. All right, so let me look at page 40 here. He says, working together in the same field, sharing the same huts, the same situation, and the same grievances, the first Black and white Americans, aristocrats accepted, developed strong bonds of sympathy and mutuality. They ran away together, played together, and revolted together. They mated and married, siring a sizable mixed population. In the process, the Black and white servants, the majority of the colonial population, created a racial wonderland that seemed somehow un-American in its lack of obsession and in its lack of obsession about race and color. There was, to be sure, prejudice then, but it was largely English class prejudice, which was distributed without regard to race, creed, or color. There were also, needless to say, prejudiced individuals in the colony, and this is the fundamental difference between prejudice and racism. Their personal quirks and obsessions were not focused and directed by the all-organized will of a community. Their personal quirks and obsessions were not focused and directed by the organized will of a community. The basic division at the juncture was between servants and free people. And there were whites and Blacks on both sides of the line. There were European indentured servants. You're going to have, prior to slavery being codified, you're going to have Africans who are indentured servants as well. You're going to have some Africans who are going to acquire land and have both white and African indentured servants as well. All right. Of all of the improbable aspects of this situation, the oddest to modern Blacks and whites is that white people did not seem to know that they were white. Now, we're talking about in the 17th century, and this is before 1675 and 1676 when you have Bacon's Rebellion, because Bacon's Rebellion is going to change things, because it's going to be after Bacon's Rebellion that you start using the term white for the English to drive a wedge between European indentured servants and enslaved Africans. All right. So pay attention to this. It appears that from surviving evidence, the first white colonists had no concept of themselves as white. The legal documents identified whites as Englishmen and or Christians. Englishmen and or Christians. This is in the 17th century. And we're talking about this time, we're talking about the early 1600s. The word white, with its burden of arrogance and biological pride, developed late in the 17th century, as a direct result of slavery and the organized debasement of Blacks. The same point can be made from the other side of the line. For a long time in colonial America, there was no legal name to focus white anxiety. The first Blacks were called blackamoors, Moors, M-O-O-R-S, Negers, N-E-G-E-R-S, and Negars, N-E-G-A-R-S. The word negro, a Spanish and Portuguese term for Black, did not come into general use in Virginia until the later part of the century, the later part of the 17th century, late 1600s. This is going to be after Bacon's Rebellion of 1675 and 1676. That's on page 40 of the 6th edition of Before the Mayflower by Maroon Bennett Jr. And then also he talks about, where is that in here? He talks about Africans who are voting, which is very, very interesting because it's contrary to the generalizations about slavery that we oftentimes hear. Let me see if I can find that here quickly. I thought I had it bookmarked. I've got this book like really highlighted. Where is it? Just give me a minute here. Let me see if I can find that. You have to go to the index. Many of you all have read this book. Chapter 2 is crucial. And then also the back of the book is we has a chronology of historical events. That is really crucial also. Let me see, where did I have it? Because I saw that. Okay. Okay, right here. Page, what page is this? 38. Okay. Additional evidence of the relatively high status of the first American blacks is to be found in colonial documents, which indicate that they voted and participated in public life. It was not until 1723, in fact, that blacks were denied the right to vote in the colony of Virginia. So this is before the American Revolutionary War. American Revolutionary War is going to come along like 50 years later, 1775. Okay. It was not until 1723, in fact, that blacks were denied the right to vote in the colony of Virginia. According to Albert E. McKinley, blacks voted in South Carolina until 1701. They voted in North Carolina until 1715, and in Georgia until 1754. Now, he's not talking about Africans who were enslaved. He's talking about the free Africans. Not only did pioneer blacks vote, but they also held public office. There was a black surety in York County, Virginia, in the first decades of the 17th century, and a black beadle, B-E-A-D-L-E, in Lancaster, Virginia, in Lancaster County, Virginia. Nor was this sort of thing confined to Virginia. The first blacks in Massachusetts, they arrived in 1638 on the slave ship Desire, America's first, America's first slave ship. He said, America's first slave ship. They were apparently assigned the status of indentured servants. He's talking about 1638. All right, because it's going to be 1641 in Massachusetts that's going to be the first colony to have codified slave laws. All right, so the mistreatment of Africans is going to evolve over time, and is even going to evolve even before you have codified slave laws. But the first colony that have codified slave laws is Massachusetts in 1641. They don't exist in 1619 in the what would be the 13 English colonies. I'm not talking about Spanish colonies or anything like that. I'm talking about specifically the English colonies. If we look at, so that's page 38 or 39, page 38. And then lastly, if we look at back in the back of the book, he has 100 pages of milestones in history, landmarks and milestones. Okay, it's like 100 pages of them, starting with 1619. If you look at 1641, okay, 1641, it shows December 1641. It shows, it talks about Massachusetts became the first colony to give statutory recognition to slavery. That's 1641. Other colonies followed. Connecticut, 1650. Virginia, 1661. Maryland, 1663. New York and New Jersey, 1664. South Carolina, 1682. This is under the English, okay, not the Spanish, under the English. Rhode Island and Pennsylvania, 1700. North Carolina, 1715. Georgia, 1750. Okay. So our whole concept of how all this evolved is largely inaccurate. This is why, you know, the articles at the 1619 Project are so important. The articles at the Washington Post surrounding this 400 years are so important, even though they don't have enough to talk about 1526, even though they don't talk about the Khoisan, they don't talk about, you know, a lot of information that Dr. David Imhotep talks about. They're still important, okay, to expand our knowledge of slavery and how all of this evolves. All right, so let's see. Then we have Toya, Reese, okay. How's everybody doing? I'm going to continue from my notes here just a second. And if you like this type of information, also, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show, or at our website, africanhistorynetwork.com, africanhistorynetwork.com. Okay, and it helps us keep doing the research, broadcast our Sunday night show, helps finance the research, helps when I have to pay to travel to different events to speak, etc. Helps us pay the bills. Let me see. I have the book Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. And I don't know where that book is. It's in one of these stacks. I got 4 stacks of books here next to my desk. Where's Golden Age of the Moor? Oh, down here. This other stack over here. Because these are 2 books I use in the online course. Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, which deals with the Moors in Europe, 8th century AD on, the Moors in Europe. And then also from Runoko Rashidi, Black Star, the African presence in early Europe, okay? So to understand the transatlantic slave trade, you got to understand the Moors in Europe. That's going to lead to the transatlantic slave trade happening. And really, when you understand the chronology of this history, the transatlantic slave trade is actually Europeans getting revenge on the Africans for what happened in Europe, for what happened with the Moors in Europe. This is really them getting revenge on them, okay? And even though early on in the English colonies, you're going to have Africans intermixing with Europeans, you're going to have, they're going to start banning that, okay? They're going to start banning that because they're trying to separate the races, and they're trying to keep mixed race children from taking place, and they're trying to redistribute the wealth, power, and resources based upon race also, okay? So they're going to shut that down. But also, you got to understand, the Moors were in England. The English saw what happened with the Moors intermixing with the European population, and how it changed the complexion of the population, the European population. When we deal with the American Revolutionary War, and we deal with the 13 colonies fighting against King George III, well, King George III's wife was Queen Charlotte Sophia. Queen Charlotte Sophia was of African descent, African Moorish ancestry on her mother's side. Okay, research Queen Charlotte Sophia. So you got to understand how all this history, we have to understand this chronology of history. And historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the culmination of a sequence of other events that take place that lead to a larger event happening. What Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, one of my teachers, talks about, as he says, to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. All right. Okay, so if we go back to my notes and if we look at the article here from this is the article from the Washington Post. Before 1619, it was 1526, the mystery of the first enslaved Africans and what became the United States. This is by Gillian Brackel, September 7th, 2019, for the Washington Post. So they talk about those Africans in South Carolina. And let's see, so by the early 1520s, nearly all of the indigenous people of the Spanish colony of Hispaniola were dead. Enslaved Africans were brought in to replace them in the backbreaking search for gold, and the gold was getting harder to find also. Lucas Vasquez de Ayllon, Ayllon, who was a government functionary in the colony, wanted to start a settlement of his own. And he got permission from the King and Queen of Spain to send scouts sailing up the East Coast of what is now the United States to find a good spot to set up this colony. According to historian and anthropologist Guy E. Cameron, 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 that permission came with the specific instructions that they build friendly relationships with any indigenous people they encountered. Build friendly relationships with any of the indigenous people they encountered. So the scouts returned with details of the coastline of what is now South Carolina and Georgia, and something else. 70 indigenous people they had abducted and enslaved. Now, Lucas Vasquez was angry. Kidnapping was not exactly a building block of friendship, okay? Still, he did not order their immediate return. Soon the captives all started to die, quote, of sorrow and hunger, for they would not eat, end quote, according to a Spanish historian at the time. One of the captives named Francisco survived. Francisco quickly picked up, learned to speak the Spanish language. And Lucas Vasquez grew to like him. So Lucas brought Francisco to Spain to help convince the King and Queen of Spain that although the scouting missions had not gone as planned, they should still be allowed to colonize. They should still be allowed to colonize. All right. So Francisco told them how amazing the land was, just like Spain, and how welcoming his people, the Shakori, Shakori, the Shakori would be. Now, he embellished quite a bit, according to historian Guy E. Cameron, and it is easy to see why. Convincing the Spanish to sail back to the Carolina coast was the only way that Francisco could get back home. So permission was granted to Lucas Vasquez, and Francisco sailed for Hispaniola, where they gathered people and supplies for their settlement. A few months later, likely in early June of 1526, they had 500 colonists, 100 enslaved Africans, plus livestock, plants, and provisions packed onto 3 ships. They arrived on August 9th, 1526, and immediately ran into a big problem when one of the ships sank. They managed to rescue all of the passengers, but lost most of their food. As soon as they were on land, Francisco, who talked about how great the land would be and how welcoming his people would be, as soon as they landed, Francisco disappeared into the trees, leaving the colonists no way to communicate with their new neighbors. The colonists settled farther south between South Carolina's PD River and Georgia's Sapelo Island, Sapelo. named in and they named it San Miguel de Guadape, Gualdape, and ordered the first enslaved Africans to clear the land and start building homes and a church. Okay, I wonder if they were going to let the Africans come in and pray. So they had arrived too late in the season to plant crops. However, and with the food supplies destroyed, the colonists began to starve. Plus, as David E. Cameron's research with Stephen Vermette, Vermett, in the Georgia Historical Quarterly indicates, they experienced an unusually cold fall. Okay, the season fall. Then an unknown infectious disease spread through the settlement, and a group of settlers who sought help from indigenous neighbors were killed. Within a few months, 350 of the 500 settlers had died. It is unknown how many of the enslaved people perished. The Spanish did not keep a count. Then on October 18th, 1526, Lucas Vasquez dies. Okay, Lucas Vasquez Ayllon dies. His chosen successor did not sit well with some of the settlers, and two factions developed. Then the Spanish historian wrote, quote, "It happened that some of the Negro slaves independently set fire to a leader's house, and as the fire burnt, they all gathered to kill him. And in this way, they managed to escape," end quote. So the first enslaved Africans known to have been brought to the continent were also the first to revolt. Now, David Cameron wrote, quote, "It appears that the Africans ran into the forest, never to be seen again," end quote. Now, weeks later, when the remaining Spanish bailed on the settlement and sailed away, there was no mention of any enslaved Africans on board. It is impossible to know what happened to the Africans when they escaped into the forest. There are no written records. Would the Shakori or another indigenous group have recognized them as victims of the Spanish and taken them in? Or would they have seen them as an extension of the colonizers and killed them? Would they have been able to survive on their own? Okay, this is what Gillian Brockel asked. So I guess the name is Gillian, Gillian, Gillian Brockel. Now, little is known about the Shakori, Shakori, but David E. Cameron speculates they probably would have helped the Africans so long as it did not negatively impact their own preparations for winter. It is also possible some of the Africans traveled south as winter approached. Africans knew about the movement of the moon and stars and would have known that the weather would be warmer farther south, Cameron wrote. And we were astronomers. We were and still are astronomers because we invented we created astronomy. Now, legends about Black Indians, tri-racial isolate groups, and Maroon communities abound in the southeastern United States. And we know the Maroons are the runaway slaves that go into either mountains or go into areas that may go into communities with Native Americans and run away. We see that in Florida prior to 1821, because Florida was Spanish territory before 1821 when it became U.S. territory, and Florida was free land, free territory also. So one of the reasons why the U.S. wanted that territory was because Africans would run away into Florida. Okay, and some of them would go live with the Seminoles, and the word Seminole and the word Maroon come from the same Spanish word Cimarron, okay? And it refers to runaway, okay? Just like the word Seminole refers to runaway as well. But it comes from the word Cimarron, C-I-M, I think it's C-I-M-A-R-R-O-O-N or one R. But it comes from the word Cimarron, all right? So if you look up the word maroon, and if you go, say, to Merriam-Webster, it should take you to, when we look at the etymology of the word, should take you back to Cimarron. Yeah. So if we look at, I'll give you the link here. History and etymology of maroon. Noun. The first etymology is French, maroon, Spanish, chestnut. Secondly, probably from French, maron, M-A-R-O-N. Fugitive modification of American Spanish, Cimarron, wild, savage. Okay, C-I-M-A-R-R-O-N. And maroon is going to come from that Spanish word Cimarron. And then also Seminole is going to derive from that as well. Let me post this link here. This deals with the word maroon, and this is at Merriam-Webster's website. And it gives you the etymology of that word. It goes back to the Spanish Cimarron. Okay. Kimberly, Net. Okay, how's everybody doing? All right, let's continue. If we look at, let me see here. I think it's in this book here, Dirty Little Secrets About Black History, Volume 1. I think Dr. Claude Anderson talks about this in here also. I think I have it bookmarked, where he deals with page 149. Yeah, I have it. Good. I have the post-it note here. Page 129 is chapter 12, Runaways and Hideaways. And under the section of Many Facts, M-I-N-I, Many Facts. The first recorded slave revolt in North America occurred in 1526. Black Africans escaped from Spanish explorers on the coast of the Carolinas and sought refuge with Indians further inland. That's what that's talking about. So if you have Dirty Little Secrets About Black History, Volume 1 from Dr. Claude Anderson, who's one of my teachers as well. I've interviewed him a number of times. Go to page 149. And he talks about that in here. Okay. All right. Let me see here. I get through all my notes because I had 6 pages. Oh, there's one more paragraph. Okay. So they talked about we were talking about the Native Americans. That's how I got on the Seminoles. Let me finish this here. Okay. So legends about Black Indians, triracial isolate groups, and Maroon communities abound in the southeastern United States. The Lumbee, L-U-M-B-E-E, of North Carolina surmise they are descended from Native Americans who intermarried with white settlers and freed African slaves. Okay, the Lumbee. And let me see here. Let me pull up this article. There's a link here. So when you look at this article, I'm going to give you this article here to read. This is before 1619, there was 1526. This is from Washington Post. Washington Post has a series of articles dealing with this 400-year commemoration, okay? Spanish explorers brought 100 slaves to a doomed settlement in South Carolina or Georgia. Within weeks, the subjugated revolted, then vanished. Now, they have a link here for the Lumbee, and it takes you to an article from the Washington Post, What Makes Someone Native American? One tribe's long struggle for full recognition, okay? And in here, I think they talk about the Lumbee, yeah. Okay, so check out these links here in this article as well. Now, the Brass Ankles of South Carolina, which is another Native American tribe, the Brass Ankles of South Carolina are believed to come from intermarried runaway African slaves, white indentured servants, and Native Americans, although that is just a theory. They were classified as free people of color before the Civil War. They were classified as free people of color before the Civil War. When you click on this link dealing with, they have a link here for the brass ankles. It takes you to redbonenation.com, redbonenation.com, and it has like an archive here, brass ankles of Somerville, South Carolina. Okay. And it says the brass ankles of South Carolina are a large and well-known group. Nothing is known of their origin except they are in an area where the Indians were all enslaved and kept with African slaves and Irish indentured servants. They are considered by local legend to be the descendants of white slaves, supposedly forced to wear leg chains, hence the name brass ankles. Okay, with only small amounts of Indian, and so it's believed that they have small amounts of Indian and African ancestry, but their status is very low, perhaps even lower than the local Black population. Okay, so you can go read this also. Okay, so that gives some background information on the brass ankles. Now, in 1920, historian and co-founder of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, one of my heroes, observed, quote, one of the longest unwritten chapters in the history of the United States is that treating the relations of the Negroes and the Indians. One of the longest unwritten chapters in the history of the United States, is that treating the relations of the Negroes and the Indians, end quote. And for more information on Dr. Woodson, there's a good book that Dr. Payroll Dagbovie wrote. It's all the way down here at the bottom of this stack. Let's see, this one right here. Carter G. Woodson in Washington, D.C., the father of Black history. Carter G. Woodson in Washington, D.C., the father of Black history. So Dr. Payroll Dagbovie is a history professor at Michigan State University. So back in 2015, when we commemorated the 100th year anniversary of the founding of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which is now the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, there was a big event at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History that ASALH organized. Okay, this is the organization that Dr. Carter G. Woodson co-founded. And Dr. Dagbovie was there, and he did a presentation talking about his book. So I bought his book and met him. And this is, I mean, there are not a lot of books on Dr. Woodson, okay, but this is probably one of the best ones. This is a deep book and gives a lot of background information on him. And, you know, this is, most pictures I see of Dr. Woodson, I don't see him smiling. Okay, this is probably this is probably the biggest smile I've ever seen Dr. Woodson give. Okay, but this is a bad brother, and he created Negro History Week in 1926, which in 1976 became Black History Month. Contrary to popular belief, white people did not give us Black History Month. That's something we created out of self-determination and understanding that our people don't understand our history. And it was never designed to be the only time of the year that we study our history either. Okay, it was never designed to be the only time of the year we study our history. It was designed to be a celebration of our history and a time to look forward, a time to look backwards, a time to look forward, but it's time to be a celebration of our history. And it had a focus, Negro History Week had a focus on our children. And during the celebration that second week in February, it was supposed to be a time that children really showed us what they had been learning all year round. Okay, because Dr. Woodson said it didn't make sense to just teach our history to our children in the schools 1 week out of the year. He said it needed to be taught year round, and Negro History Week needed to be a period of time that they really showed us what they have been studying all year. And then also you're going to have all types of celebrations, and you have all types of lectures and things like this taking place during that second week. And he said that there should be extensive preparation that goes into that celebration that week. Okay, there should be extensive preparation. It's not something that you just start preparing for, 2 weeks prior. All right, now this every year for African American History Month, there is an annual there's an annual theme coming from Masala. Okay, every year there's an annual theme coming from Masala. So people that see my presentations dealing with African American History Month, and if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Email me at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Okay. Also email me there if you want to advertise with the African History Network. All right. I'm going to get into some information dealing with this year's theme. This year's theme is Black migrations, which ties right into 400 years in Virginia, Point Comfort in Virginia, but it not just deals with the transatlantic slave trade, it also deals with the Great Migration of 1915 to 1970. Okay, so many people who celebrate African American History Month, what is now African American History Month, what used to be called Black History Month, most people don't know there's an annual theme. And that annual theme gives guidance. It makes it relevant. Okay, so as I explained, and if you've seen any of my presentations dealing with African American History Month, you notice, as I explained, we don't have to keep recycling the same 15 to 20 sanitized Negroes every year in these African American History Month celebrations. Because a lot of them, unfortunately, a lot of people mean well, but a lot of them lack purpose. They lack focus. So this is why a lot of people don't even want to go to them. All right. So very quickly here, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. A current promotion for a few more days is get 3 months for the price of one. Now, a lot of people want to invest. A lot of people want to learn how to invest. Well, the profitroom.com can help you with that. So the profitroom.com is an education company, and they can teach you about investing in the stock market, how the stock market works. They can teach you about options, futures, and the foreign exchange markets. They specialize in day trading and also mentorship programs as well. They have mentorship programs that are designed for beginners. Okay. For more information, visit their website, theprofitroom.com, theprofitroom.com. And they also have special classes as well that you can take advantage of also. Theprofitroom.com. Now, a lot of people hear about cannabidiol, right? Well, darkmagentas.com is the place to go. Dark Magenta specializes in creating home spa products based on nature's healing and soothing properties. Dark Magentas carries essential oil and cannabidiol infused bath bombs, shower steamers, sugars, sugar scrubs, and soaps. They include oils and herbs such as lavender, rosemary, eucalyptus, sage, cedarwood, oatmeal, shea butter, cannabidiol, and more. They also carry oil diffusers and 100% pure essential oils. Visit their website, Dark Magentas, Magentas, darkmagentas.com, and indulge in these treats for the body and the mind. All right. So Ganja Man, how you doing? Ganja, Lorenzo, Christine, just a few of the people here. All right. So I spoke during February 2019. I spoke at I did about 15 different African American History Month events. Spoke at a lot of African American churches as well. I have my latest bundle pack is a 6 DVD bundle pack called Black Migration 1619 to 2019, the year of return. It includes presentations I've done this year, presentations during African American History Month, okay? And it also includes, I have a lecture, Black Migration 1619 to 2019, from the birth of a nation to the Red Summer of 1919 to the Detroit Race Riot of 1943, okay? So we just posted the link here. That's a 6 DVD bundle pack on sale, $50. It's also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. But if we look at some background information here, because this connects all this together, right? If we look at some background information here dealing with African American History Month and this year's theme specifically of Black migrations, which a lot of us don't even know exists, all right? an annual theme. Now, I've studied the whole history of African American History Month. I've looked at all the themes going back to 1928. Looked at the annual themes going back to 1928. Here's the DVD cover of my lecture, Black Migration. So that's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so when we look at this year's theme from Asala, Black Migrations, here's a graphic. When you go to their website, asala.org, ASALH.org, asala.org, they have this information there. Asala's 2019 theme, Black Migrations, emphasizes the movement of people of African descent to new destinations and subsequently to new social realities. While inclusive of earlier centuries, this theme focuses especially on the 20th century through today. Beginning in the early decades of the 20th century, African-American migration patterns included relocation from southern farms to southern cities, from the south to the northeast, Midwest and West, from the Caribbean to U.S. cities, as well as to migrant labor farms, and the migration of noted African-Americans to Africa and to European cities, such as Paris and London, after the end of World War I and World War II. So we know at the end of World War I ends in 1918. And right after that, you're going to have 1919 is known as the Red Summer. The Red Summer, you have over 25 major race riots in this country. Okay. And a lot of people this year are learning about the Red Summer. This is 100th year anniversary of the Red Summer. So as we commemorate it, as we deal with the annual theme of Black migrations, within that also is the 100th year anniversary of the Red Summer. All right. And you had these African-American men who served in World War I, over 300,000 of them served in World War I. And when they come back home, you know, they're saying, wait a second, we're not dealing with the same segregation. We said we fought in the war, we shed our blood, we fought for this country. We want all of our rights now. We're not dealing with the segregation. We're not dealing with these Jim Crow laws. And this is going to explode into 25, actually over 25 major race riots across this country. And you had, when these white men, there's about 5 million men who fought in World War I, most of them white. So when these white men left to fight in World War I, you know, they left jobs behind. They were employed. When they came back, a lot of these jobs that they had were being done by African Americans and immigrants who came to this country. All right. So a lot of these white men could not find jobs. You had 1915 basically starts the beginning of the Great Migration. Some sources say 1916. And it's World War I that's really going to kick it off. Now, yes, you had some migrating before then because of Henry Ford in Highland Park, Michigan. And Highland Park is inside of Detroit. But what really kicks it off is going to be World War I. And you're going to have some of these northern factories who are marketing to African Americans in the South who are on farms, who may be sharecroppers, things like this, to lure them up north to come work in these factories, work in these plants. All right. So the theme goes on to, the annual theme goes on to talk about the information from Asala. Such migrations resulted in a more diverse and stratified interracial and intraracial urban population amid a changing social melee, such as the rise of the Marcus Garvey movement in New York, Detroit, and New Orleans. So Marcus Garvey immigrates to the U.S. in 1916. He's inspired by Booker T. Washington's autobiography, Up From Slavery. Garvey is coming from Jamaica. He founds the UNIA in Jamaica, Universal Negro Improvement Association. It starts in Jamaica in 1914. He comes to the U.S. and starts setting up chapters here in the U.S., okay? The emergence of both Black industrial workers and Black entrepreneurs, the growing number and variety of urban churches and new religions like the Nation of Islam, founded in 1930, right about 1930 in Detroit, new religions, new music forms like ragtime, blues, and jazz, white backlash as in the Red Summer of 1919, Okay. But then we also deal with Rosewood, Florida, 1923, January 1923. We deal with Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1st, 1921. Okay. White backlash, as in the Red Summer, 1919. The blossoming of visual and literary arts, as in New York, Washington, D.C., and Chicago, like the Harlem Renaissance, and Paris in the 1910s and 1920s. The theme Black migrations equally lends itself to the exploration to the centuries to the centuries later decades from spatial and social perspectives, with attention to new African Americans because of the burgeoning African and Caribbean population in the U.S. Northern African Americans returned to the South, okay, because of gentrification. We're being gentrified out of the North, so we're going back down South. Racial suburbanization, inner city hyper ghettoization, health and environment, civil rights and protest activism, electoral politics, mass incarceration, and dynamic cultural production. So that is this year's theme, which is not just for the month of February, but all year, to be commemorated and studied, celebrated, etc. Okay, so that comes from the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which is the organization, and they are the official organization, the governing body of African American History Month, what used to be Black History Month. And this is the organization that Dr. Carter G. Woodson co-founded September 9th, 1915 in Chicago. Okay, so most people don't know this information. Most people don't know there's an annual theme or anything like that. There's any guidance or anything. They just keep bringing out former slaves and all that stuff and eat soul food. All right. Let me look at, I'm looking at one of my slides from the presentation. So this is something that Dr. Woodson talked about. Let me go to this slide here. This is from my presentation on Black migrations that I did this February and even after February. So Dr. Woodson hoped that Negro History Week would evolve into Negro History Year, as he affirmed from time to time. Dr. Woodson consistently instructed those observing the week that they needed to diligently prepare for the celebration months in advance. Diligently prepare for the celebration months in advance. Now, this is when it was just a week. And that after mid-February, they needed to continue acknowledging the role of African descents in world history, not just American history, in world history. And when you go back and look at some of the annual themes, they tie into African history also, African history and culture. So it's not just, it's never designed just to look at our achievements and accomplishments in this country, but also on the continent of Africa, but also African people worldwide as well. Quote, Negro History Week should be a demonstration of what has been done in the study of the Negro during the year, and at the same time as a demonstration of greater things to be accomplished, end quote. Woodson instructed school teachers, okay? Quote, a subject which receives attention 1 week out of the 36 will not mean much to anyone, end quote. Okay, so read pages 100 through 102. Read the whole book, but this is from pages 100 through 102 of Dr. Dak Bovey's book, Carter G. Woodson in Washington, D.C., the father of Black history. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, let me go some of your comments before we get out of here. Dynamite, how you doing, Mark? All right, what's up, Frat? You all right? Go mob, Frat. Mark? Okay, Mark. Which would you pledge, Mark? Let's see here. We've got Mashawn, Lorenzo, Willie. How you doing, Willie? All right. So also, if you like this type of information, be sure to register for the online courses I teach: Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We do this class Thursdays, 8 p.m. Do about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a 8-week, 16-hour online course. This time is going to be 9 weeks because we had like a special, week for August 20th, 1619. All the sessions are recorded. We deal with thousands of years of history. As soon as you register, you can watch classes 1 through 4, and there's like 36 hours of bonus content you can watch from around the world also. Okay. And I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references. There's about 50 articles that we reference. You can use this for your children also. Okay. So the subscription, you can use it for the family, right? You can use it for the children. I would say it's like PG-13. So I don't curse really. It's not vulgar, but because we deal with, the enslavement of African people, there's some things that are unsettling. All right. So I would say it's probably PG-13. Okay. So we posted a link here, and it's also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. So hopefully this helps to, and also visit asala.org. Okay. ASALH.org, asala.org. That's the official website of the Association for the Study of African-American Life and History. So hopefully this helps to shed some light on the commemoration, and there's an increased focus on our history because of August 20th, 1619. But for a number of reasons, that's not when African people first came to this land. Okay. And I provided you with some evidence on that also. So you can go check out these articles as well. Let's see. And history.com had one that I referenced already. America's history of slavery began long before Jamestown. America's history of slavery began long before Jamestown. That's by Crystal Ponti, Ponti, August 14th, 2019. That's for history.com, which is the official website of the History Channel. All right, let me see if there are any more questions. Okay, so I will be in, where I'll be, Oakland. First I'll be at the All Black National Convention, September 27th through the 29th, that weekend. The All Black National Convention that Dr. Boyce Watkins does. Visit allblacknationalconvention.com, allblacknationalconvention.com for more information. I'll be speaking on that Sunday, the 29th. I'm on the panel discussion that starts at 9:45 a.m. dealing with power and politics, and I'll have my DVDs there also. I'll be there Saturday and Sunday. So that's in, where is that? Houston, Texas. That's in Houston, Texas. The All Black National Convention. Visit allblacknationalconvention.com, and Dr. George Frazier will be there as well. He's speaking. We're in a couple of documentaries together, the Black Friday documentaries. It'll be Dr. Boyce Watkins, Jade Arundel, who you see, who's with Fly Nubian Queen. She'll be there also. And then the weekend of October 12th, October 11th and 12th, I will be in Oakland, California. I think in one of the videos I said Orlando. Okay, Orlando's the other side of the country, even though I do want to go back to Orlando. So if you're in Orlando, you want me to come speak, email me at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. But the weekend of October 12th, which is Columbus Day, so you can come out and discover something. I will be on the Black Agenda Tour with Michi X and others. Visit theblack-agenda-on-tour.com, theblack-agenda-on-tour.com. Okay. And that is, that's the weekend of October 12th. And I'll be doing a presentation there, and I'm on the panel discussion also. So the presentation I do is called 6 Principles of Political Self-Defense, How Laws and Policies Impact the Economic Conditions of African Americans. Okay. And I have that on DVD at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. That the version you get, that's the one I did. That's when I first did the full presentation. That was July 21st, 2019 at the Black Homeschooling Conference in Atlanta, because I speak at the Black Homeschooling Conference, which takes place at the Georgia Piedmont Technical Center the third weekend of July. So I'm there each year, and I'm one of the presenters. So that's the Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling Education Expo that Queen Thais organizes and her group. Okay, visit liberatedmindsexpo.com LiberatedMindsExpo.com for more information about homeschooling African-American children from an African-centered perspective. Okay. Christine, okay, I thoroughly enjoyed this lecture. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing this. Okay, no problem. All right, everybody, follow us here on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. Turn on the notifications so you know when we go live. Follow me on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. And turn on the notifications there. Listen to our Sunday night show is on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the African History Network show. Normally, I'm in the studios at 9, 10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF here in Detroit, but they've been playing Major League Baseball for the past few weeks or so, which has been preempting my show. And I've been in and out of town also. I've been in, speaking in Pembroke, Illinois, Chicago, Atlanta. I've been speaking in Atlanta, June, July, and August at different events, the Juneteenth Festival and Black Homeschooling Conference, and also with the Black Agenda Tour. So, but hopefully I'll be back in the studio very soon, but we're broadcasting here as well. They're not what's going on there. And Major League Baseball is not stopping this Major League information, okay? All right, we have to get out of here. Remember, and also you can donate at African History Network. PayPal.me/the AHN show. PayPal.me/the AHN show. Hidden Colors 5 is available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And for each copy you purchase, you get 3 of my digital downloads free. 3 of my lectures in digital download format free with each copy of Hidden Colors 5 that you purchase, okay? That's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, Verona. All right, how'd you all like this type of information? Okay, Verona, thank you so much for the history of our people. Okay, you're in North Carolina. Reese, what was the website referring to the dark? Oh yeah, Dark Magentas, MAGENTAS, darkmagentas.com. Okay, and also posted profitroom.com as well. And post a link here also for the online courses you can register for, and that's also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. Okay, Reese, thanks for the valuable information. Okay, everybody, look, hey, I have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Remember, right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace.